Erie Nua planning. It is accepted in all countries that planning and construction are interlocked. Detailed planning must precede the construction of any building, but in addition, a nation must undertake comprehensive planning of its physical environment if the best use is to be made of natural resources. Natural resources include visual amenity. In other words, a landscape which must be safeguarded for the enjoyment of the citizens as a whole. In Ireland, the need for physical planning has been grudgingly accepted under the name of town planning, owing to the complexity of modern living. Dublin has benefited from the planning which took place in the 18th century to the extent that the street network laid down then is still usable. Had proper planning been imposed 100 years ago, our rail system would be of greater use to it. Instead, military and strategic considerations dominated its layout. If we fail to plan properly now, our roads and industries will be wrongly located in relation to our needs in 20 years' time, and our housing will be obsolete. The obsolescence period of houses and buildings is reducing. It is now regarded as about 60 years. Thus, towns can be expected to be continually in a process of change, and much wastage will result in if far-sighted planning methods are not adopted. As a people, we have not an outstanding tradition in building despite an early and promising start in pre-invasion times. History has since dominated the picture as symbolized by its visible remains. We should not feel ashamed of them. Whether these buildings were opened by the foreigner or not, they were built by Irishmen, and in every worthy case, we should try to preserve them. The Irish building industry employs north and south about 100,000 men and is organized in about 500 firms, mostly small but dominated by about 6 giant firms. There are also a large number of subcontracting specialist firms for steelwork, flooring, asphalting, painting, etc. The latter are more stable than the small general contractors. In recent years, a number of firms specializing in civil engineering and harbor works have come into being. These are offshoots of the big building firms. Only the largest firms employ a complete range of craftsmen. Traditionally, these are employed and sacked as contracts are secured and completed. On average, building workers receive only 8 months' pay per annum. Holidays are usually unpaid owing to the short service period. Conditions on sites are often primitive. The boss in a small firm is sometimes himself a worker on the site. At all times, he must be on close call. Much time is wasted by lack of continuity of contracts. Sometimes, in order to keep going, a small man will undertake work at cost. The bankruptcy rate is, therefore, the highest in any industry. The average net profit does not exceed 6%. Quality of work is variable in both small and large firms. In prosperous times, quality suffers. In the 32-county republic, the building industry will be reorganized with the following objectives. A. Establishment of a central planning and building authority responsible for all building and construction work. B. To meet the social and economic objectives of the developing Irish economy. C. To provide secure employment and proper working conditions for those engaged in it. These objectives may be obtained by the following means. A. An alive, top-level, and long-term direction. Building needs should be programmed for 10 years and projected in broad terms for another 5, investment being planned accordingly. B. Reorganization with the industry permitting the introduction of state-owned and cooperative firms alongside those which still choose to operate as members of the private sector. The policy of the state firms will be to think in terms of the industry as a cooperative enterprise for which They will bear the major responsibility. They will employ a full range of trades. C. An extension of schemes of education for those planning to enter the industry and development of the apprenticeship system in conjunction with education in such a way as to raise the general level of skill. D. Constant employment at a high basic wage supported by productivity incentives, dry site conditions, mobile kitchens and toilet facilities. E. Democratic reorganization of professional management and workers' unions and institutions in order to achieve a common goal. More diversification of the professional groupings to be encouraged with a trend towards formation of schools of design. F. Maximum development of mechanization and prefabrication with use of standard modules and a computer control of scheduling, material allocation, and stocking. G. Encouragement of craft work where a particular standard or a one-off type building is involved. The industrialization of building will proceed rapidly, making use of the potentialities of the Belfast shipyard and aircraft industry where skills exist easily adaptable to this end. Building raw materials will come increasingly under state control. Cement and steel already are in part, in order to ensure coordinated expansion of the industry. The metric system will be adopted throughout and fittings will be standardized. The state-owned firms will operate mainly on major works and on export building. It is estimated that at present money value we could export in the form of materials, system buildings, and site constructed building and heavy engineering work to the value of £30 million. Cooperatives of building worker firms will be encouraged. Private firms will also be encouraged on condition that they conform to national rates and standards. The existing trade union structure is not adapted to defend its members' security in the face of advancing techniques without the introduction of restrictive practices. Due to the introduction of power tools, dry building techniques, and other methods, trades become redundant. New trades emerge, while the skill required of the so-called labor is increasing. This latter category, once considered the lowest element in the industry, is now often a trained machinery operator or an expert in the technology of concrete. It will therefore be necessary to initiate the reorganization of the building trade unions with the maximum of democratic discussion and participation of the membership into a single union covering all trades and professions. The improved apprenticeship scheme will be integrated with the educational system, which will include schools of building technology in the 4 major cities. These will be these will be of university status and will be linked with a building materials and methods research institute. The ordinary trained building worker would enjoy an educational level equivalent to the present graduate of the secondary educational system. Thus, the building trade unionist of the future will be a highly skilled and versatile technician and will need an organization of a rather different nature from those which have grown up historically. The objective of the union will, of course, be unchanged, but it will be considerably easier to attain it. The higher grade of building professional would include, with his scope of present-day architects, specialist engineers, and surveyors' qualifications, but he would be given opportunity to develop his talents beyond the design of individual buildings. The schools of building technology will be linked with the Building Materials and Methods Research Institute, the objective of which will be continually to improve the quality of buildings and to reduce their cost in terms of human labor. By a system of refresher courses, all workers would be kept up to date on building technology. Building land at present is subject to speculative purchase and sale, and ground rents constitute an increasing fraction of the cost of new housing developments. under the Sinn Féin government. Building land will not be the means of enrichment of private individuals. It will instead, by the subject of compulsory purchase by the state or the municipality concerned, at a price related to its agricultural value. The land will then be transferred by the state to the individual or body developing it. The owner will be compensated or given an option on an equivalent holding elsewhere. Ground rent will be abolished. In accordance with the policy of using the interest rate on capital as a social planning device, the rate for capital invested in housing developments will be set at a maximum of 5%, instead of the occupier of a house paying 50% of his outgoings in the form of interest on a loan from a building society, local loan fund, or insurance group. He will now pay only a small fraction of that sum. It will be open to anyone to build his own house on land purchased from the state or municipality. The National Housing Program will be planned in such a way as to create traffic-free environments where amenity is conserved and essential facilities conveniently placed. Village, small town, city central, and city suburban areas will be approached differently. Common to all will be the idea of a community, a unit which provides a maximum of all types of amenity within convenient distance. Thus, farmhouses and buildings will be grouped in hamlets sharing all services. Rural towns will be encouraged to develop a communal and square structure rather than the present straggle of houses along one or two roads. Cities will consist of noise-free and traffic-free groups of communities served by adequate highways and rapid urban public transportation. High-rise flats of adequate area with lifts will form the basis of central city renewal. The creation of linked parklands in valleys and along river banks will be a natural corollary of such planning. Standard flat and house plans of a sufficient number of types to cater for community needs will be developed and built on a large scale using layouts prepared in competition by young urbanists. Standard buildings and all types, including outbuildings, would be available for setting on free professional advice in rural areas. Floor space areas inside houses will be increased. Houses will be fully fitted with built-in storage and equipment, including cookers and refrigerators. They will be planned for easy extension, for flexibility in room use to meet the changing needs of growing families. Industry will be located with the intention of creating convenient and functional factories and other major structures as places of employment to meet transportation needs as part of an export building program. Rational planning of industry will ensure the fullest development of port towns, especially those on our western coastline, and major inland towns. As far as possible, export industries will be located in port towns. Industrial building will be supported financially by the National Development Authority, which will maintain staff competent to uphold environmental and planning standards.